Hello. Welcome to Cal Revs, the chest of the best. The adventurer's best friend, where you can get everything you want for just your top half off. And tonight, we're talking shop. Specifically, episode 9 of Magnus Protocol, rolling with it. Case filed CAT 3RB 3354 1410 1998 0803 2024. In other words, apparently it takes place in October 14th, 1998, filed March 8th, 2024. It's it's been a while, I think, with regards to certain themes that appear in episode 9 when compared to the previous episodes. In this instance, we don't exactly get an avatar. In some ways, you could argue that we do get an avatar's appearance, but it's definitely a victim in this case. No. What we get here is the exact details surrounding the effects of an artifact out in the wild. I mean, I guess the last time we had an incident involving artifacts specifically would be the episode regarding Hilltop Center and the volunteers bringing things to the Hilltop Center that we have very good reason to believe were cursed items of sorts. But the last time we touched upon an item being just straight up an artifact of an entity was the violin and the appropriate violinist. But this time, we have a proper victim of this incident. But we'll get to that in a hot second. Without wasting too much time, let's go over the arguably brief events surrounding this incident specifically. Now, the episode begins with Sam filling out his response 1-to-1 paperwork when Celia arrives. And we get a taste of exactly what questions are on the response 1-to-1 paperwork. It is fairly interesting. And I suppose in some ways it's kind of on brand and in character, considering how thorough, for lack of a better term, the binder for categorizing and filing paperwork in the first place is. Apparently Sam is getting weird questions such as, please list your earliest 4 negative memories associated with school or an equivalent childhood educational institution, then rate each from 0 to 7, with 7 being neutral and 0 being neutral and 7 being traumatic. What? Please list every dead creatures you have seen in the last 3 months. How many blood transfusions have you had within the last 10 years? And rather jokingly, and with no lead up or context whatsoever, why? I don't know if that was supposed to be connected to the blood transfusion part, but yeah, that's the nature of the questions that Sam is answering on the 1-to-1. And in terms of analysis, I gotta say, I could not begin to understand the reasoning and understanding as to why that paperwork is so thorough. But anyways, as he's talking about this with Celia. And unfortunately, Celia reports that she has been unable to get anything from the Magnus Institute in terms of like the system, in terms of cases. It seems, against all odds, the Magnus Institute simply does not appear within the system as much as Sam would have liked. At which point Sam decides that maybe it's about time he ended his search. Celia leaves for coffee, at which point Sam continues to work, when he gets a talker. This time, dictated by Chester, aka, John. So, there you go. And the incident in this case is quite interesting. As if on cue, Freddy has decided to give Sam a talker that involves the Magnus Institute itself, specifically marked as a statement from the Magnus Institute Manchester, a research assessment for one artifact CD 137, a pair of dice. Quite interesting that we should get something like this. It's definitely ever so slightly out of the norm of the way things are done for the Institute, at least when it comes to statement taking that we are used to from archives, and yet still, all the same, this is what is occurring. An art assessment of an artifact, which is, now that I think about it, John never really had the artifacts right there in front of him. At least not on memory at this point. Mostly because it probably wasn't necessary, but this, I guess, is a different matter. The assessment seems to mark the pair of dice by some bizarre criteria. It says that its viability as a subject is none, that its viability as an agent is low, and that its viability as a catalyst is medium, before recommending a referral to the Catalytics for Enrichment Applicability Assessment. Don't know what that means. Seems like a nice little tidbit to add, so we'll just put a nice little pin on that for now. It includes a statement taken by a donator who notes that they need to be very careful with those dice. Notes that he just needs to tell them how he got them and that they'll accept. He is very clear on the word accept the dice. He blames an old friend named Gary for getting him roped into it. Apparently, after a bad breakup, they reconnected with Gary once, met at Gary's apartment to see that he'd been doing very well, but also not too well put together. A little mousy, a little, ooh. There's a lot going there, essentially. The dude lives in a very nice apartment and seems to be doing really well, but seems to be sporting a lot of injuries for some reason. It's during this instance that Gary apparently gives the donator the dice, because apparently there were plans to play TTRPG of sorts. As the donator notes, Gary had been famous in their memory for playing, but for some reason this time around he was being very cryptic and he didn't give him any of the weird dice. He decides instead to give him weird dice. A pair of heavy off-white dice with painted black dots. And then, at some point, because the donor says they accepted the dice, they now know that in that moment they owned those dice. At which point, Gary all of a sudden gets a call saying someone from the group can't make it, that's canceled, etc., and then shoves them out and gets them out of their life. Although, rather interestingly, at this point, the donator notes that the dice were very clearly weird, that they discovered this very early on. And they know that they're weird. After all, apparently, the Institute is specifically looking for supernaturally active items. That's a quote, by the way. Supernaturally active items. We'll put a pin in that as well. And then it continues with a statement with the donator realizing that the rolling of the dice makes stuff happen. Rolling high means good things happen, and rolling low means bad things happen. But rolling really low means things like injuries and the like. He notes that he notes that they're not sure if it was really them that decided to roll the dice or if they were being compelled, but they also realized that the rolls weren't really random. If one rolled high consistently, you'd be due for a low roll, and vice versa. It all seemingly balances out. And while the donator says that they felt that they always chose to roll the dice, at the same time, it felt like they couldn't really say no to it either. And then they started to wonder, however, whether or not it mattered who rolled the dice. If the balancing of luck was locked to a single person, or if it was just a universally shared stat. And indeed, they would end up going around and asking other people to roll the dice instead. Nobody, it seems, ever said no. But it seemed to work. The system of like shoving the dice onto other people to roll it, not exactly giving it to them, but to roll the dice, works. On occasion, sometimes would, quote, rob the donator of, quote, their good luck, something that they would hate them for, but other times they would take the bad luck instead for them, and they took a dark joy whenever they rolled low, and they could see the misfortune of occur to other people, or when they rolled really low, and they could look forward to a good roll for themselves, the donator. As time went on, however, there was a shift, and it started to get more abstract. Before, the donator would sometimes get items in terms of their good luck, but sometimes it became simple as just being in a good mood. And as a result, the better luck made the donators start to feel a little disconnected from the world. They fancied themselves a luck ghost or a harbinger of misfortune. And as such, they started to dress the part, wearing like a hood and then going up to people and giving them dice to roll, and then shoving their bad luck onto them with the hopes of being able to roll really high the next time they themselves rolled the dice. And it is this exact lifestyle that leads them to Gary again, who is apparently living a normal life. Upon seeing Gary, they decided to, well, talk, interact, and, do as they do. So they approached him, made them roll the dice yet again as a show of gratitude for what Gary did to the donator. And it's in that moment that for the first time ever, the donator sees Snake Eyes comes up. Yeah. There's a moment of silence. And then, as the dice stare back at the two of them from the top of the table in the cafe that they occupied, a truck crashes through the shop and violently kills only Gary. At which point, I guess, the donator decided it was high time he stopped playing with dice and decided to give them to the Institute. However, as the statement taker evaluates what they have in front of them, the donator says that they would like to roll the dice one last time, for old time's sake. And then it's stated that the transcription ends due to interruption, that the statement giver was declared dead by the paramedics on scene. Pretty rad, right? Just like first of all, just a very very tongue-in-cheek moment in universe by whoever is listening and watching, that the moment that Sam is wondering whether or not he should give up his pursuit of the truth or anything related to the Magnus Institute, that a literal statement. We get a statement within an incident within the world of the Magnus Protocol. It's just very sneaky. Very sneaky. But we'll get to the analysis portion of that. We'll just do that now at this point. So, if we go ahead and look at the case report as it itself exists, one thing that stands out to me is the fact that it's an actual Magnus Institute statement, yes, but it's been digitized and uploaded to the internet. Or at the very least, it's been uploaded to a database that Freddy was able to access in the first place. Now, we know that Freddy is able to access a variety of technology and databases, private and public, all the same to Freddy, it seems. But it's just interesting that an actual statement from the Institute should be digitized and uploaded to a database when in archives digitizing statements resulted in technical interference. It was one of the reasons why John had to resort to magnetic tape when it came to recording statements and committing them to audio format. That being said, of course, knowing what we know now about why magnetic tape was the medium being used, that being a deliberate effort by a certain entity to ensure that John's voice could be utilized for its purposes. I guess we can assume that. Assuming, right, that any given dictated incident is real, much like any recorded episode in archives is also real and not a hoax and not being given by someone lying about an incident or supernatural spooky nonsense, that would imply that maybe the format, the strategy of taking on the apocalypse and tossing it somewhere else is not being utilized this time around. Maybe, maybe not. Of course, the Institute was burned in early 2000s, burned down in the early 2000s with all of its records and everything being lost alongside the fact that there were no survivors, so it's hard to tell at this point. But it's just, why? It means that no one was interfering and no one was trying to push someone towards using magnetic tape in here. I guess this just further cements the idea that it really is not that the supernatural affects technology in a specific way per se, unless it's a case-by-case basis, but rather it was a concentrated effort. I do believe Gertrude at one point noted that perhaps during the slaughters ritual, the Risen War. I believe that was I don't remember which episode that was. It might have been the Nemesis. Hard to recall, but she did consider the possibility that who knows, maybe the web interfered with the results of a given vessel's radar. So perhaps that could be the some case as to why digital statements was just not a possibility. Magnetic tape, it seemed to be the most important and powerful means of fulfilling their needs. And not even that, there are also like old-fashioned photos would also come up with regards to the not them, allowing them to figure out who exactly had been changed or taken, although of course that wasn't something people could take advantage of for a good long period of time. So maybe in this case, the fact that it's digitized should indicate that it's less important that these incidents are capable of snagging the entities. It gives this idea that maybe the OIAR isn't serving the exact same purpose as the Institute in both the purpose of its existence and the ulterior purpose of its existence. And that's just solely based off of the fact that it's still just digitally accessing this information. In any case, looking at the statement itself properly, we find that it is occurring at least 2 years prior to the fire, at which point we get to see that the Institute apparently has taken to collecting artifacts explicitly. This is only based off the fact that the donator, right, of the dice notes that the Institute is looking for spooky supernatural items. It's not like the Institute wasn't looking for spooky artifacts. However, it seems, based off of, word of God, in this case, word of the author, most of the times they seek out volunteers to give them statements, with artifacts turning out to be little more than not an afterthought per se, but being something that is simply added in. Something that circumstances and happenstance, typically, while being connected to any given statement or investigation, end up haphazardly in artifact storage. Whereas here, it seems that they're explicitly looking for artifacts and evaluating for something, right? In the beginning, the evaluation of the dice starts with an evaluation of its viability as, quote, a subject, an agent, and a catalyst. Not easy to figure out what that could mean, as well as the referral for enrichment. One has to wonder what the heck they mean by any of that. Like, what exactly, if we were to look at entities, artifacts in general, and try to parse together what subject, agent, and catalyst could mean, then it's not easy. If we were to look at the dice as like a viability as subject, they say none. Oh, what? Viability as agent, low. Viability as catalyst, medium. Now, if it's a catalyst, that maybe we could look at it as a chemist might, and wonder that, oh, maybe it's being used to speed up something, some sort of reaction. The easiest reaction that we could maybe assume to be a catalyst for would be rituals, maybe, opening the gap in reality, possibly. Viability as agent and subject, however, I don't even know how to begin to look at it from the angle of as an agent, so as something acting in like as a tool for the entities, maybe, but it seems a bit weird. They're looking into like what it is capable of, it seems, just by choice of the word viability. It's a very deliberate choice of words, meaning that they're trying to use it for something. What? We have no idea. There's no idea for now. But what on earth? Anyways, so let's step away from that for just a quick second, and we'll just look at everything else about the case, just because that's all we can really do. It seems, well, yeah. Luck is a strong theme with regards to the dice, which makes it very hard to figure out what exactly is the active entity in this instance. In some regards, if we look at dice specifically, then I guess you could think of Magnus Archives episode 29, Cheating Death, in which case Death actually appears and challenges a dying American revolutionary to a game in the possibility that winning would allow the man to not die. One of the things that Death shows is, as a means of demonstrating that they can pick the game, is, I believe, a chess piece, but also dice as well. The dice notably being made out of bone, it seems. And it ended up being that the person challenging Death selected a card game in the end. So the dice more or less cameo in that, rather than being used, being reused. But there is something of an air of certainty involved with regards to the dice, where in terms of just like, oh, it's not random, not exactly. If you have a bunch of bad luck, you're going to get a bunch of good luck as a result. There, because of that, because of the cheating death aspect, it's possible that the dice represents some sort of representation of the end, especially given by what happens if you roll snake eyes. I guess it like legitimately actually kills you, but it does so violently. It does so violently, right? So the fear of bad luck, of good things eventually coming to an end, I guess you could instead chalk it up to the desolation, or the slaughter, just because of the sheer randomness. Even if the luck isn't exactly random, it all balances out in the end. I guess is the fear of pain. A lot of violence seems to occur as a result of bad luck, especially in regards to getting snake eyes. So you could point it out as being the slaughter, but the luck theme could also make it a point of desolation, because you could lose your home, you could lose all. They didn't note any loved ones being lost in that regard. In any case, there is some mixing. Desolation and slaughter, those are easy to mix up in general, just because they both deal with pain in the first place. But the fear of bad luck and seeing what happens, I guess you could in some ways also note that as being somewhat eye related, because you end up seeing the result. You wonder what the result is going to be, and then you now know what the result ends up being. So it's there. The eye is there. It's also kind of sort of like cheekily snuck in with the idea of the snake eyes staring back at you, which I personally thought was a brilliant piece of writing to put into the instant. Well done on the writer's part. That was absolutely beautiful, and it conjures up such a foreboding image of just having the two dice on double ones. Just it's scary, you know? It's scary. I really dug it though. It was really cool. And yeah, that's about it with regards to the dice. In terms of like what the entities could be representing. Unlike the violinist, the person here, while they were sort of spreading its influence in some way, shape, or form, um, at least in this case, they know that they are in fact something of a victim. It doesn't feel so one-sidedly in service of someone, whereas, say, the violinist, at the very least, just, well, I don't want to say just fed the violin. The fact that they were feeding the violin in the first place makes them seem more like an avatar, whereas here the donator is just straight up a victim. Like, there's no way to really look at it. Maybe the violin was also compelling its player to play. I wouldn't doubt that. But here the dice are just supernaturally like compelling people to roll the dice, and there's nothing you can do but say no. Driven by curiosity to see the results, that's also a possibility. Also suggests a strong presence of the eye as well, but whether that's important or not is not quite clear. In fact, it's not clear at all. And anyways, it all just sort of like circles back with the blending of the fears being there. It all just circles back to the Institute and why it's collecting items in the first place. Is it possible that they are doing the work of, you know, is this the source of all the artifacts that were collected by the web to be used at Hilltop Center in 2016 in universe? Like, is that were they trying to do exactly what I think they were trying to do? It would make sense in the sense of like why they were being evaluated for viability. Viability as what? Again, don't know. Subject, agent, catalyst. It seems that these dice were a good possibility for a catalyst, but we'd have no idea what that entails and what it was being used for. Maybe it was being used for a ritual. Maybe they were collecting artifacts, and those artifacts were supposed to be utilized by whoever wanted to perform the ritual and speed run into the apocalypse pell-mell. However, with only an incident assessment and a statement assessment and artifact assessment, we don't have enough pieces in the puzzle to really connect the Institute to the events of Hilltop Center. I mean, the most that you could draw some parallels, sure. The Institute is collecting artifacts. We know that for a fact now. They probably had a lot of them, especially considering the fact that they were heavily advertising that this is what they were looking for. And we know that there were a lot of artifacts that made their way to Hilltop Center before it was burned down. Speaking of which, the Institute got burned down. It's worth noting, I guess, but I don't think it's going to really pay off to note the parallels between the two, with the sole exception of the collection of artifacts. The collection of artifacts is another thing entirely. And while it's not evidence in support of my hypothesis that John was collecting, or an entity of an actor for the eye is collecting artifacts in order to see what would happen and see if they can speed run to the apocalypse using artifacts rather than using a person instead. But if indeed that's what was happening, it could at the very least maybe tie in with my hypothesis that the eye does remember being thrown out from its previous home and wanting to see what would happen if they were to do this instead. And then I suppose working alongside the web in that regards, it wouldn't be the first time, right, that the eye and the web are in cahoots, but that's only because the web likes to be in control of such things and operations. So maybe the web thought, hey, why don't we give it a try? Let's see if that would work, and decided, hey, you know what? Fine. You can take the wheel this time, even though you're the stupidest of us all. Let's see what happens. Maybe it will turn out to be good. And the web is all about unforeseen consequences, after all. So hey, maybe they thought it would be worth giving a shot. Maybe the artifacts that show up on Hilltop Center are the artifacts that the Institute had in its possession. It was clearly collecting them, but until an avatar of the web, or indeed even an avatar of the eye, or previous worker, employee of the Institute shows up, we'll never really know. And if indeed Gertrude / Gigi / Jerry were employees or former researchers, or just in some way, shape, or form associated with the Institute as it existed in this universe, which I'm highly suspicious of, and I doubt anyone doubts that, I doubt that they're going to come forward and explain what the Institute was trying to do, if they were even within an inner circle to even know what it was trying to do. But that does it with regards to the Institute. Actually, no, there was one more thing I considered as a possibility. What if in episode 4, taking notes, this is the one where the violinist appears. You'll recall that in that episode, the violinist got the violin from a mysterious English stranger who was wandering the forests of Germany, I assume. And we had some questions, wondered if they may have been like the Salesa of that time period, collecting artifacts. It would seem that those artifacts could very well have ended up in the Institute, because one thing that we can possibly consider is that we briefly, I believe, consider the possibility that maybe the collector was an avatar of the Eye. And this coming from the fact that they managed to get the young violinist during his time to basically spell out his entire life story. At which point he gifted him a violin from his little bag of artifacts, and maybe did it to see what would happen. Who's to say? But I'm starting to wonder. That collector had like a random bag of miscellaneous, touched by different fears artifacts mixed together. The next time we see a collection of items, it appears at Hilltop Center, a noted area where the meeting of such fears is supposed to crack open the crack in reality into a gap. And then the third time we get an instance or a hint of a collection being made is here, and it's explicitly at the Magnus Institute. Which leads me to wonder, what if the collector in episode 4 is this universe's Jonah Magnus? What if, from the get-go, Jonah, yet again, in harmony, on the same wavelength as the Eye, points for consistency, by the way, Jonah, decided, hey, why don't I collect items instead? Whether he knows exactly why or why not is besides the point. Point is, if indeed the collector is an avatar of the Eye, bonus points if it is Jonah, then that would, I would say, support the idea that the Eye knows what happened to it, what happened to the entities, and is explicitly trying to see what will happen if they go about it in a different way compared to last time. Just something to consider. And if you're wondering how the Englishman Jonah could end up in Germany, he did have written acquaintances out in Germany, right? Albrecht von Closen being one of them, the ancestor of the Key family, and the source of a lot of Jonah's sort of like personal written collections, if I recall correctly, specifically from like the mausoleum that was in the forest nearby Closen's estate. So it would totally make sense for him to be there. Although how and why he has a collection of items already by that point in time, I think we're just gonna have to wait. I think we're just going to have to wait until we get another incident report from that time period. But if indeed that is the case, that makes me wonder, what if anytime Augustus is dictating a statement, it's the original Jonah Magnus? If indeed that occurs, and we get another statement from Augustus from that time period, and we get another appearance of some mysterious stranger collecting items and or dragging information out of people, I don't know, man. No, man. That seems kind of compelling. Oh, if only just a little bit. Not too strongly compelling, but it's certainly worth keeping an eye out for. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and make a note of that in my own theories document here. And we'll rock with that for now, but we'll keep it in our back pocket. And odds are we're not going to get, of all the things that we're going to get answers to, that's probably not going to be one of the more urgent ones, just by virtue of the fact that it feels like a very huge reveal. In any case, it's at this point that we can step away from the incident and look at the final events that occur in the episode. Now, from that point on, it switches on over to Lena's office. After the incident ends, it goes over to Lena's office, wherein Gwen enters and is given her first assignment as externals liaison. She is instructed by Lena to visit a man named Nigel Dickerson and give him an envelope which contains a name and an address, and instructs Gwen to note anything he says or does in response, specifically stress, emotions, and the behavior of any companions that he may have with him. Apparently, Nigel Dickerson in this world is some sort of famous TV actor from the 90s. Some sort of just a celebrity of sorts, known for his appearance in something called Saturdays on 6 or something along those lines. Gwen notes that it just seems a bit odd that she has to go to such a big personality for some reason, but Lena notes that there's no real need to really worry about that sort of thing. And when Gwen questions why it needs to be an envelope given to this person, Lena notes that their line of work needs the personal touch of in-person meetings, and that this will be a good experience for the new externals liaison. Now, if we break that down, I worry for Gwen. She has to come back from this alive, but the question is, what is an old TV personality doing that could require their interaction and constant communication? Well, we don't know constant communication, but likely, very likely, I think, since all they're really getting is a name and address, it leads me to believe that maybe Gwen wasn't too wrong about stuff being outsourced, but I think the outsourcing was for the response department, and the response department might be Nigel Dickerson in this case. It's a fairly reasonable assumption, though quite interesting that they would send Gwen explicitly out to go in there. Maybe she's right. You know, the in-person meetings might be good. It would be awfully darkly hilarious if, after all that happens with Gwen trying to climb up the ladder, that she ends up just straight up being killed in the next episode after she sees Nigel Dickerson as a means of plugging up a leak. We hardly know anything about Lena, so it's not like it's like it's outside the realm of possibility, and she has, at the very least, tried to kill at least one person, Klaus, who, granted, had to escape and is still running amok and wild somewhere in maybe the UK, maybe somewhere else. If he's wanted by the government, he's probably still in country. We don't know. We'll probably see him. But it would be quite interesting if Lena just straight up was just like, oh yes, I'll send Gwen out and then that'll take care of that. Problem solved. But Gwen's gonna be around for a long time. It would be a bit... I think they want to milk the Bouchard name for as much as possible. So, whether or not Gwen ends up being antagonistic by the end of this, or a force of good, we'll just have to see. But the scene ends, and we cut back to Alice, who is out for morning drinks after work with Teddy. Teddy makes a return after a long, absence since the first episode, because, as you may or may not recall, Teddy was our first instance of people being able to just straight up leave the OIAR, as if they're not connected to the eye in any way, shape, or form, and don't have to worry about doing such horrific self-mutilation in order to get away from it. Unfortunately, though, Teddy's job fell through. Just some complications with the workforce. Sounds fairly mundane. Apparently, whatever company he was applying to was downsizing, and they didn't tell the HR when he was having his interview. So sad. But in the grand scheme of whatever's going on in the world of Magnus Protocol, it's quite mundane, and I'm sure with his work experience and whatever it is that he has under his belt, he'll be back in the job, no problem. Though he notes that he's not keen on going back to the OIAR in any way, shape, or form. But at the very least, we know that the OIAR isn't going to be hunting him down, right? We have an instance of a former employee of the OIAR that is not the subject of an attempted murder. So, hey, that's good. Anyways, they converse for a little bit, catch up. And Alice says that, hey, things in the office are nice right now, which Teddy catches on, saying that he's known Alice for 4 years and knows she doesn't just call things nice like that without actually having deeper thoughts to say. Alice tries to defend herself, saying that they're on top of caseloads and that Sam and Celia are getting along nicely, which Teddy locks in on, homes in on, and suggests that it might be a jealousy thing. Talks about it with Alice, and while Alice tries to deny that she has feelings for Sam still, it's noted by Teddy that apparently Alice and Sam were together for a long time. Years, in fact. A specific number isn't thrown out, but they were apparently very, very close together. And, that's noted simply by their first conversation in the series where she wonders if it's okay considering their exes. It's noted when Sam points out in the one of the previous episodes, whichever one that Celia first appeared in, which I believe is 2 episodes ago at this point. 3 episodes? Hardly matters. It's notable in the sense that Sam points out where Alice would have hidden her secret stash of snacks in the office because it was the exact same space that she would have hid her snacks when they were living together. They have history. They have a lot of history together, and well, you don't bring this up unless it's going to be important. But it could also be the very thing that helps us characterize Alice just a little bit more and see why exactly she ends up humoring Sam. Because as they are having this little barbed back and forth with Alice trying to defend herself and suggest that Teddy is off his rocker, Sam actually joins in on the drinking. Teddy takes off because he has another job interview lined up, and Sam asks Alice to go with him to explore the Magnus Institute. I knew that Celia was going to be the one that enabled Sam's dangerous and wild curiosity and need to know. And I fully expected Alice to be the super ego to Celia's id and would help moderate Sam's nature of curiosity, I suppose. But on that, I was half right. Celia indeed does end up pushing Sam, after all, to pursue his curiosity and investigations, even if it came up on a dead end. And Alice, while she did insist that Sam drop it, I guess ultimately didn't really do much on that front. Worse, when Sam, here, asks her to go with him to explore the Institute, she asks why Celia isn't getting roped into it, and it's just because Sam feels closer to Alice. Which, coming on the heels of the previous conversation, I guess, hits a note with Alice, and Alice reluctantly agrees. Asking when they're going to go. And I'll go ahead and spoil this for you right now. They go in the next episode. But we're not going to be talking about that tonight. We're going to be talking about that Saturday instead, actually. And with that, we'll be caught up we'll just straight up be caught up with the series. Good thing too, because the new episode, the hiatus ends and the new episode will be dropping tonight. I will go ahead and give that a listen as well, but probably after we talk about episode 10, and I should have a nice little analysis prepped and ready for you guys either by Monday or Thursday, at which point the Talking Shop series will be instead a weekly occurrence. So we can go back to our other streams. But anyways, that's that situation. If you are currently listening to the VOD, please, by all means, leave your theories, hypotheses, and predictions in the comments. Drop a like, subscribe, and follow for those of you who are catching me live on Twitch. Thank you so much for popping in, hanging out, and being your beautiful selves. I deeply appreciate it. With that being said, guys, shop's closed. Get out! Bye-bye.